once again. Right, today we're going to a new sutta. That is in chapter 14 or volume 40, 40 SD 40.14. Right, we have a revised edition of the translation, updated one. Please get a copy. The sutta is entitled Nana Titiya Sutta 1 or Patama Nana Titiya Sutta. So there are at least two of such suttas. Translation: the first discourse on the various sectarians. Nana means various. Titiya actually refers to this. We translate this literally as forders, those who bring their followers over the shallow part of the river to safety. Titi. In Malay, you have the word titi, it means bridge. So it's like a water bridge, if you like, where people cross over. There's no bridge there exactly, but the water is shallow, so people would walk across there. Very often you see in the cowboy movies, these cowboys, when they ride across the river, they will choose a part which is shallow. That's called a ford. Okay, so the ford makers or forders, that's the literal meaning. When we translate this, we usually translate as sectarians. In other words, this word is never used for the Buddhists. It's used for non-Buddhist sect members, the various sectarian members of various sects. Sutta 1. This is from the Udāna. Udāna, chapter 6, Sutta number 4. Udāna is one of the 15 books of the Khuddaka Nikaya, the fifth volume. So, but this also includes some quite old suttas there. So this is one of those very interesting texts. It's a very simple text, so it's also very humorous, but very useful to help us understand the nature of views and argumentation. Now, the story of the blind man and the elephant is very well known. You might say all the other religions know this story, and if you go to all these religions, listen to some of the speakers, sooner or later they will quote this story, and many of them do not know this story actually came from the Buddhist suttas. On the other hand, this story is much older than the Buddha. In other words, it's not a floating tradition, but it is the Buddha presented this story in such a way that it's well remembered. Okay, we have a recording of the sutta in the Udāna. The Jains also have this story, but in the case of the Jain, we find they mention a bit of it's a shorter version. We'll come to that in a while. Okay? Let's go straight into the sutta, then as we go along, I will just make some comments as necessary. Now before that, you might like to look at the picture on page 183, right? You can see this is a Japanese drawing using the ukiyo-e print style by Hanabusa Icho in 1888. Okay, there's a Japanese rendition of an elephant, right? So you see the blind man there, all confused about the elephant. Okay, page 185. The first discourse on the various sectarians, U 6.4. Thus have I heard, at one time the Blessed One was staying in Anathapindika's park in Jeta's Grove near Savatthi. Now at that time there were a number of recluses, Brahmins, and sectarian wanderers of various outlook. Okay, there's a long sentence, let me just pause here a while. Sectarian wanderers, so they were also wanderers. Now when we hear the word wanderers, paribhajaka, we're talking about something like the modern hippies of the 60s, if you like. They decided to leave home and kind of live a freelance life all over the place. They are not necessarily celibate, but they're wanderers. In other words, they are a kind of breaking away from traditional religion, especially Brahmanism, and they are looking for some kind of answer. So the Buddha's time was a time when ancient India, or to be more precise, northern central India especially, was rapidly changing, urbanizing, becoming more peaceful, more civilized in a sense. When I say civilized, I remember my history lesson in the primary school. Civilized means townification, more towns growing and so on. Urbanization, the kings were conquering bigger territories, so people can travel more widely, more safely. There were more roads, commerce, things like that, So and people had more time because of division of labor. So you have various religious groups also growing at the same time. So these are the wanderers, they wander about. Or various outlook, various philosophy, various ideas, living around Savatthi. Why Savatthi? Because Savatthi is a big city in those days, and as you know, that's where this kind of people depend on alms, because there are rich people there, not people there, so easy to get food. Holding various views or various persuasions or various inclinations or preferences. So we can see here quite a busy religious situation, if you like. Relying for their support by way of these various views. Okay, it's quite telling. So in other words, each of these sectarians, they have their own opinion. They will come up with something different. They need to come up with something different, and they try to think of something as bizarre as possible sometimes. Why? Because they want to attract followers. And this is a time when we can get some of the craziest ideas in philosophy. For example, one philosopher says that we all are made up of atoms, tiny little atoms, and that's all we are. So if you have a sharp sword and you cut through a person, all you're doing is just separating the atoms. So you find it's quite a gruesome idea, and you're killing the person, but it says, well, it's just atoms are being separated. So there are all kinds of ideas like that. And of course there are those, today we call them agnostics, but they're quite a strange group, even hilarious group. They try not to answer anything, they try not to commit themselves, so some people think they're very wise because of that. For example, if you ask them, what do you think, is this world impermanent or not? So this person will say, well, depends, If this world is impermanent, I would tell you so. But it's not that I'm not telling you, but it is such that even if I tell you, it's difficult to say whether it's right or wrong. So it's better that I don't tell you. And it goes on like that, It's called ill-wriggling. And the Buddha says these are the stupidest group of philosophers, because they don't give you any answers. They just twist things around, lots of words, but in the end you say, what's that? Nothing at all. And mind you, people love them. They say, wow, this guru is very deep. In Singapore we say very chim. No one understands him, and they support him. Right? So there you are. So this is the time when you have all kinds of gurus. Here the Buddha lists 10 wrong views, which are very common. And then in another sutta, 16 wrong views. They're kind of very similar, but they're elaborated. And these are the 10 wrong views which the Buddha discourages us from speculating about, because they are speculations, there are no fixed answers. You can go on talking about this, there's no end to it, and you're not going to be happy with it. It's not going to help you in your progress. Unless you're doing an academic course, I suppose, you're in an academic field. They, in a sense, they rely on this secularity. If there's an end to philosophy, there's the end to the employment of philosophers also. So they're looking for some open-ended problems. So this is a big difference between Western philosophy and Buddhist philosophy, if you like. In Thailand, the word for philosophy is called prajna. Prajna is a Thai pronunciation of panya. So you can imagine, to the Thais, philosophy means wisdom, because you're thinking of a Buddhist idea. So because in Buddhism, when we talk about philosophy, we're talking about thinking in the service of wisdom. Thinking helps us to understand things, and then there's the end to it, end of suffering. Okay? But in Western philosophy, it's different. It's just an inquiry. with or without answer, doesn't matter. In fact, better without answer, because you have an answer, that's the end of the whole program. So you notice when you look at Buddhism, if you look at the history of Buddhism in modern times, the early centuries, say about 200 years ago, people were not sure who the Buddha was. So someone would say, oh, it's just a solar myth. And one will say, oh, it doesn't exist. It's just stories by some Indian holy man. And everyone would say, oh, no, he exists, and so on. So you have all these different strange views of the Buddha. And some of them would say, oh, this idea came from Iran, reflecting some ancient Iranian religion. And then later, the studies became more close, more detailed. People say, oh, he actually exists, and they found all these archaeological remains and so on. So they are more certain about him. And then they discovered meditation, and then today you find the Western mind scientists and scholars are plagiarizing Buddhism. They are using all kinds of things from Buddhism, and then giving new names to it, and so on. So in different ages you find people approach Buddhism differently, and there's always something new. If someone will say, oh, the Buddha said this, and then someone will say, oh, no, that's true, he said something else. So every generation the scholars will debunk it, if possible, try to debunk the previous generation of scholars, and that's how they kind of make a name for themselves. And some scholars really go way out, and they say, oh, actually if you look at it, the Buddha was actually a very good businessman, because he made friends with kings and merchants, and he knows how to talk to them, so he has so many viharas all over India, and so on. And other scholars will say, how did this man get this idea, So, the interesting thing about scholarship is, once you get your PhD, you make sure you got everything right to PhD. Once you get your PhD, your professor, you can say anything you want, no matter how bizarre, If your name is there, people will respect you. And probably some other scholars would argue and say, oh no, it's wrong, but it doesn't matter, you still get your tenure, you still get paid. So you can be bothered what opinion you have of them. The Buddhists may complain, and it's okay, you can do what you like, we're not concerned. So this is scholarship, academia. Whereas in Buddhism, we are very careful about what people say, and we try to make people happy, we want to arouse negative emotion. So there's a big difference between academic study of Buddhism and spiritual study of Buddhism, which we should be aware of. So here the Buddha is telling us, okay, these are the 10 points or 10 theses, 10 ideas which are very common in Buddha's time, which Buddhists or Buddhist seekers should not concern themselves not too much anyway. Okay? So what are these? Now I have labeled them nicely for you in 3 sets. Okay, we're on page 185. So some of them say, the Buddha says, there were some recluses and Brahmins who held this doctrine, this view, the world is eternal. Only this is true, all else false. Notice, it's qualified. It says, so this person says, oh, the world is eternal. Okay, so this one Buddha says, only this is true, everyone else is wrong. That's the problem part, everyone else is wrong. Okay, so that makes it a sect, sectarian. Okay. Right, we have this Lotus Sutra seminar going on, and it's a very unique situation here because Buddhism is very open. So we have not only Mahayana people listening to the talk, but also Theravada and the followers of early Buddhism. And I'm one of those odd men out. I'm supposed to give a talk on the Lotus Sutra also. I protested. I said, why you ask me to talk about something I don't believe in? I said, oh no, you want your opinion? I said, okay, you ask for it. So my problem is, how do I make both sides happy? The Lotus Sutra is one of the most terrible anti-Buddha sutta I've ever seen. And many of us know that now. I mean, they teach things like Arahats are not fully awakened yet, they still need to become Buddhas. I don't know where they get the idea from. Nowhere in the suttas you'll come across such a thing. And they're talking about so many Buddhas, as many as the sand on the Ganges River, And I told them, something that got them very upset, He said, if you think of the Buddha as being as many as the sand of the Ganges, then the worth of those Buddha will be like sand. But I'm happy with one Buddha, and to me that Buddha is Sakyamuni as a diamond. That's good enough for me. So they say, how can you talk like that? I said, well, I'm just responding to your logic, But the point now is, how do I present the teaching or look at it in such a way that both sides are happy? Well, I think when we bring in the teaching of non-self, things are clearer, We should not think of Buddhahood as being a person. When you say an Arhat must be a Buddha, I think the idea is a Buddha as a person, as a being. But if we agree that we're talking about Buddhahood here, not Buddha, the problem is much less. Because Buddhahood, Arhathood, there is no word Buddhahood in Pali. The closest you can get is what's called a portmanteau word or a modern term, a neologism, Buddhatta, Buddhaness, But we don't have such word in Pali. You can invent this, but it's not in the suttas. The only word in the sutta is Arahatta, double T. Arahatta means Arahathood or Arahatness. And that applies to all awakened saints. Buddha also is an Arahat. Remember, we say the Buddha, Itipiso Bhagava Arahant Sama Sambuddho Vijacharana Sampanno Sugato Lokavido, and then Arahat. Remember Arahato? Right? It's one of the virtues of the Buddha. So, if we say all Arahats attain Buddhahood, that's not too bad, because Buddhahood equals Arahathood. So it's not a person, it's a state. Arahathood, Buddhahood equals awakening. So they're all awakening, and there's the same awakening. The Buddha himself said that, and that doesn't sound so bad. Okay. Anyway, that's another area, but it's still speculation. Okay. So this is where we have to be very patient and we listen. Something which is different from our views. Like all the complaints come to me, and people come to me and say, "Oh, how can they say that?" Right. So, well, our turn will come next week. We're going to talk about.
Next week?
Yeah, next week. Yes, correct. We'll switch around. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, switch around.
Switch with the Wing Five.
Thanks for telling me.
Yes.
This Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is the first group of people that say the world is eternal. Okay. That means the world doesn't end. Another group says there were some recluses and Brahmins who held this doctrine, this view, the world is not eternal. I mean, it's going to end, right? Only this is true, all else false. And everything repeats itself. There are various groups. So I'm just going to read the ideas now. Then another group says the world is finite. Okay, ideas 1 and 2. Can you see 1A, 1B, right? So this one refers to, in terms of time, the world in terms of time. So one say eternal, the other say not eternal. Then ideas 2A, 2B in terms of space. So the third group says, oh, the world is finite. In other words, the universe is fixed in space. You go too far out, you drop off somewhere, okay? And then the fourth group says, oh, the world is infinite. You can go on and you find no end to it, all right? One possibility, of course, they all are right and they all are wrong, and depends on how we talk about it. And then you have a new group of ideas, the self and the soul. Okay, before that, now if you look at this first group, the world, this, I've written the word there, it's a philosophical word. These are cosmological speculations, cosmology. Okay, in philosophy, we call it cosmology. The nature of the universe, okay, study of the nature of the universe. The next group, the soul and the self, this one is a bit of correction, you have to switch the name around. This one is metaphysics, okay, metaphysical speculation. Okay, there are two ideas here. There was also some recluses and Brahmins who held this doctrine, this view, the soul or self and the body are identical. Only this is true, all else is false. No? So one group says, body equals soul. These are the materialists. Another one says, oh no, they're not the same. Body one thing, soul another thing. So these are only two ideas. Usually there are four, okay? body and soul identical. Number 2, they're not identical. Number 3, they are the same. And then number 4 is neither. Okay. But anyway, these 2 suffice. Okay, then the third group on the Tathagata. Here, Tathagata is a general term, simply meaning a being, or including the saints in the Buddha's time. So it doesn't refer to the Buddha. It could refer to the Buddha, yes, but as only one subcategory. There were also some recluses and Brahmins who held this doctrine, this view, that the Tathagata, or the being, or the saint, exists after death. Only this is true, all else false. For example, some people will say, oh, when the Buddha dies, he still exists, right? So that's one wrong view. Another group says, the Tathagata does not exist after death. Oh, only this is true. And then third group, or 4C rather, the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death. It depends on how you look at it. Only this is true, all else false. And then the fourth group say, oh, neither is true. Right? The third group is sometimes said to be the irregular. They say this one also right, that one also right. Depends on how you look at it, and you find in the end it's nothing worthwhile to talk about. So the Buddha continues, he says, they dwelt quarrelling, arguing, given to disputing, attacking one another with verbal knives, or the weapon of words, saying, this is the truth, or this is the Dharma, that is not the truth, that's not the Dharma, your Dharma means truth. This is not the truth, that is the truth, right? So they kind of argue. Basically they are saying, I'm right, you are wrong. Okay? So this is one of the things in early Buddhism, you find the Buddha just doesn't want to get involved in any kind of argumentation. It doesn't help. It's very unsettling. It doesn't bring mental peace. Then the next section, the monks tell the Buddha about the speculators. So here, in other words, these monks notice all these people and then they come to see the Buddha and find out what the Buddha has to say. Section 4. Now, a number of monks, having dressed themselves and taking bow and robe early in the morning, entered Savatthi. Early in the forenoon or morning also can. Entered Savatthi for alms food. Having walked in Savatthi on their alms round and finished their meal, they then approached the Blessed One. Having saluted the Blessed One, they sat down at one side. Sitting thus at one side, the Blessed One said this. The monks said this to the Blessed One. Here, Bhante, a number of recluses, Brahmins, and wanderers of other sects living around Savatthi, holding views of various persuasion, of various inclinations, preferences, relying for their support by way of these various views. And everything is repeated. They say, well, these are the people who think in this way. So here you have the sutta. The first part is the narrator's story telling us this is the situation. The second part, the narrator tells, okay, there are these monks who see the situation and then they go to see the Buddha to find out the Buddha's opinion. So here, what is the purpose of this kind of narration? The purpose is to tell us that this kind of speculative ideas and groups exist, but the Buddhists, the monks are not one of them. The monks are not involved. In fact, they were surprised. How come all these people are talking like this and arguing and so on? So they come back, they ask the Buddha, what's going on here? Now the lesson proper. The Buddha disapproves of the speculators. It's chapter 8. The wanderers of other sects, Bhikshus, are blind, eyeless, or the word is achakuka, lacking vision, right? Blind, if you like. They know neither the beneficial nor the unbeneficial, neither the truth nor untruth, or neither the Dharma nor the not Dharma. And neither knowing the beneficial, or beneficial can also mean meaning, by the way, atta, or nor the unbeneficial, in other words, a false meaning, because the word is atta. knowing neither the truth or dharma, nor the untruth, not dharma, they dwell quarrelling and arguing, given to disputing, attacking one another with the verbal knives or the weapon of the sword, saying, oh, this is truth, this is not the truth, this is not the truth, this is the truth, and so on. So the Buddha said, I don't know, these people are just arguing and it's not very useful. Then the Buddha comes up with a famous story. It's actually a Jataka parable, a Jataka story. Once upon a time, Bhikshus, there was a certain king, Raja, in this very Savatthi. So it's not named, just say king of Savatthi. Normally it's Benares, right? Here is Savatthi. Then Bhikshus, the king summoned a certain man, saying, okay, before that, let me just say one more thing. Apparently this king, as kings were in those days, they were very rich and powerful, so they have a lot of time. And this king was said to be Keli Sila. In other words, he was a playful king, maybe a young king, kind of who likes to be entertained, as most kings won't. Okay, so he decided to do something that is different from his routine courtly life, which is quite boring apparently. So he wants to entertain his court. So he got his servants together, section 11. Come now, my good man, assemble together all those in Savatthi who have been blind from birth. Now, blind from birth is the whole chapter. This is a chapter called the blind from birth, Jakhanda. It's a one Pali word, blind from birth. So you imagine someone's blind from birth has never seen a lot of things. Yeah? And in fact, yesterday we were at the bus stop and we saw this blind man. He's probably new to the area. So he just did not know his way very well. He was trying to walk to the road and then he fell and then he walked a couple of times into the lamppost. So, and he was standing there waiting for someone to guide him. So the king says, assemble all those who are blind from birth. Then he approached, then he said to the king, yes, your Majesty, so he went out and got all the people together. Then he says, Your Majesty, all those in Savatthi who are blind from birth have been assembled. Then I say, the king now is talking, then I say, show an elephant to the blind man. Then I say, show an elephant to the blind man. You can cancel the second then. Yes, Your Majesty, the man answered to the king in assent, and showed the blind man an elephant. Okay, so they got all the blind men together, and then the elephant is the center of the hall. Okay, now comes the fun part. Some of the blind men were shown the elephant's head. Okay, you got the Pali word, Sanskrit, it's a good time to learn some Pali and Sanskrit. And told, you who are blind, who are born blind, this is an elephant, right? So the servant is not telling any lies, He said, this is an elephant, right? Right? So, but the servant, when he says elephant, is referring to the whole animal. But remember, the blind man is only touching the elephant's head. So this is a real irony, see? Alright? Some of the blind men were shown the elephant and told, you who are born blind, this is an elephant. And they shown the elephant's ear. And another person or another blind man, I know a couple of blind men, they are led to the tusk, and then they touch the tusk, and then the servant says, this is an elephant. And the next one touches the body, it's the side of the elephant, and the body, and the servant says, this is an elephant. Another one touched the elephant's foot, it's a big elephant foot, and say, well, that's the elephant. And then another couple of blind men are brought to the elephant's thighs, a bit bigger part of the elephant, and told, this is an elephant. And then one is given the tail, and he holds the tail, and he's told, this is an elephant. Another one, this is the last group, is given the elephant's tuft, the tail tuft, right at the end of the elephant, and is told, this is an elephant. So here again, notice, the servant is not telling any lies, he's telling the truth. And the blind men, each other are also touching the elephant, and they're also not doing the wrong thing, they're doing the right thing. Okay? But the result is hilarious, to say the least. Alright, then the servant says, Your Majesty, the man blind from birth have seen the elephant. So I have to put seen in inverted commas. Huh? Here it's very interesting, this word seen. A blind man can't see anything. I remember this one of my fond memories of Peter della Santina. I don't know how many of you remember him. He's totally blind, he's married with one kid, okay? And I think he was blind when young. No, I don't think he was born blind. So he got his PhD and so on. So although he's blind, he goes around giving talks, often in Singapore, in Malaysia. And then one day I remember we had I think we fought a talk, so we had some intimate moments, quiet moments. And I was chatting with him, we were good friends. And there was another person with us. And this person was kind of a little melodramatic, he was kind of pitying him. He said, it's terrible, you be born blind. Couldn't be karma, could it? And then he replied, he says, almost with a vengeance, if you like, he says, what's wrong with karma? And what he's saying is, maybe I did something bad in the past, so I'm kind of paying back, so that's why I'm blind, and I'm okay with that. So it was amazing for him to be so open and honest, And there was one more time, it was humorous. Someone was saying something, and then he says, oh yes, I can see it very clearly, ha ha, he says. He's sort of joking about his blindness, and I say, I can see it, and he said, ha ha, So I thought it was very humorous about that. So here again, as you say, seen can mean also understand, right? Alright, so now the king says, the narrator, the Buddha, in this case, section 16. Then Bhikshus, the king approached the man blind from birth and said, O you who are born blind, have you seen the elephant? Yes, Your Majesty, we have seen the elephant. Right, so this is the blind man's reply. Then the king says, Speak then, you who are born blind, what is the elephant like? Okay, there you are. What is the elephant like? In a sense, the fault is not the blind man here, it's the king. You know why the king's at fault? He has asked the wrong question. He asked, what is the elephant like? Okay? Well, how do you think he should rephrase the question? He should rephrase, what do you think does the elephant feel to you? That would be more fair. Right? Because this blind man can't see the elephant, they felt the elephant. But if he questioned the blind man that way, there will be no story, you see? So what do we learn here? People like to ask the wrong questions even in religion. Okay? Now we'll come to this again a little later. So the king asks a trick question. What is the elephant like? Well, in a sense, the king is not wrong either. He says like, you see? In fact, I suppose he purposely asked the question this way because he wants to trick the blind man also. He says, what is the elephant like? Okay, now comes the fun part, right? Bhikshus, those men blind from birth who were shown the elephant's head, said thus, the elephant, Your Majesty, is like a water pot, kumbha. Huh? Now they are not wrong. Okay? Bhikshus, the blind man from birth who was shown the elephant's ear, said thus, the elephant, Your Majesty, is like a winnowing basket. A winnowing basket is this big. Okay? You know what's a winnowing basket? You don't see it nowadays because they use machines. I've seen a winnowing basket when I was a kid because there were paddy fields in Malacca. In fact, it's very near my primary school, Tangara English School. And harvest time, after they harvested the paddy, you find it, they will crush the paddy first or kind of dehusk it. Then they will put it on a big tray made of bamboo. And they were kind of, it's usually windy, so they flip it up, down, and the wind will blow away the light husk. So what falls back into the winnowing basket is the rice grain. That's called winnowing basket. Number 3, Bhikshus, those blind men who, blind from birth, who were shown the elephant's tusk, said thus, the elephant, Your Majesty, is like a wooden stake. Okay, here we have a problem, what's called editorial problem, okay? Wooden stake is killer, but the PTS, Pali Text Society version, has the word pala, plowshare. But irony here, although the two words are different in Pali, if you look at the English translation, a wooden stake, and the other version, the plowshare, kind of like the curved part of a plow, the sharp point of a plow, and you're talking about elephant tusk, they both can describe the elephant tusk. Now the question now is, how did they get two different words? This is where it's probably Sinhalese, the way it's written. So KHI, ki, and PHA, pa, they're kind of very close, because sometimes some of the letters, pa and ka probably are close, it's just a little stroke, and so they, maybe the ink is not clear, or perhaps the scribe is sleepy, human error. You could have, just forgot to put a proper stroke, and you got pala, see? So that's a possible explanation. But most of the texts, the other texts, read as kila, right? Okay, group 4. So they were shown the elephant's trunk, and they thought it was like a plowshare, the plow beam, the wooden part of the plow. And then group 5 was shown the elephant's body. Okay, it says, and today's this group says it's like a storehouse, a place where they store rice, like a silo, if you like, or even like a wall, if you like. Then group 6 is shown the elephant's foot, big foot. So it's like a mortar, and it's quite big. Mortar is a pounding place. Group 7 is shown the elephant's thigh, and this group says, wow, it's like a pillar. In group 8 is shown the elephant's tail, and says it's like a pestle, the part that you hold to pound. And then group 9 is shown the elephant's tail tuft, the end of the elephant's tail, which is fluffy. And they say it's like a broom or a besom, kind of like a duster. Okay, so this is the fun part. Each of their own opinion. And thus, Bhikshus, they struck one another with their fists, saying, the elephant is like this, the elephant is not like that, the elephant is not like this, the elephant is like that. On account of this, Bhikshus, the king was amused. Okay, so now there are some very interesting problems here. We're talking about this blind man who seemed to be really stupid, who never heard an elephant before. All the blind men in Savatthi have never seen an elephant, and they got together and they thought the elephant was just a part of an elephant. And not only did they disagree with another, they're also very violent, and they were hitting each other, and the king was amused. I suspect if you gathered all the blind men in Singapore and told them this story, they'd be very upset. They will complain to you. They say, we are not that stupid. We know what an elephant is, all right? So this is where you got to use your imagination a little bit. That this is a story, and this is a story from long ago, where information is not that easily accessible. And this is, you have the narrator's license. He probably got all the blind men who really have never seen elephants before. Probably interviewed them first, do you know what elephant is? And they said, no, okay, you can come. If the other person says, yes, I know, okay, you don't come, So they only got the blind men who do not know what an elephant is. So these are things you have to be prepared for, in other words. All right, so that's the parable. Then the explanation, okay, the conclusion, section 20. In the very same way, Bhikshus, the wanderers of other sects, blind, eyeless, or lacking vision, strike one another with their fists. Okay, here is figurative, metaphorical. They don't really fight each other. They're kind of quarrelling verbally, usually. Maybe they fight, we do not know, but mostly verbally. So they do not know what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad. Okay, so, and because of that, there's no benefit to their speculation. But they dwell quarreling, arguing. And what is the purpose of this? So that they can get followers and get support, earn a living easy way by argumentation. they become like gurus in other words. Then finally the sutta closes and the Buddha says, rather the narrator says, then the Blessed One, knowing the significance on the occasion, or on that occasion, uttered this Udāna. Udāna is a joyful verse or meaningful verse. Imesu kira sajjanti ke samana brahmana vigayahanang vivadanti jana ekangadasino. Attached to these, here says, some recluses and Brahmins quarrel divisively over them. These people who see only one side of a thing. Okay, there you are. Ekanga dasino. Eka means one. Anga here means factor. You can translate as one side. Dasino, one who sees. One who sees one side of a thing. So, it's a very important story for us here, especially when we deal with religion, when we teach the Dharma. Very often, when we present the Dharma to the public, yes, we are looking at one side of it, because we can't present too many sides, the audience will not be able to follow us. So we always present one side. And we're always careful to tell the audience, okay, this is one way of looking at Buddhism, and there are other aspects, right? That is why we would not unqualifiedly declare, only this is true, all else is false, right? So that's where, like, if we say, this certain truth, like for example, only this is true, all arahats must still become Buddha, and all else is false. No? Now, let's put it this way, I'm not against the fact that the aspiration to be a Buddha is definitely the highest of aspirations, very noble, but we should not trivialize it. It is the noblest of Buddhist aspiration, and we should not trivialize it. Okay? We say, everybody must become Buddha. What do we mean by that? It's not easy to be a Buddha. Because the teaching of the Buddha is that you don't have to be a Buddha to awaken. It's like in a university, you don't have to be a professor. If you graduated from the course, that's good enough. There can be only one professor of a certain department, who released the department. Right? So we have to think in simple logic like that. Okay? So basically the Buddha is saying, we tend to look at things incompletely, and that's called a view. It's a view of something. So why should we be tolerant? Because all of us, we are looking at Buddhism with a view, because we are not awakened yet. Only when we let go of all these views, when we get the whole picture, then you don't have views, then you are awakened. Then you find you don't really need to argue with anybody. Alright? So in a sense, you find the way the forest monks talk, the real forest monk, Ajahn Sumedho is in town, and if you listen to the way he talks, you find his talks tend to be very simple, direct to personal experience, rather than talking about deep philosophical stuff and so on. So he tries to present the Dharma as in its totality. It's not easy, but Dharma as experience, in other words, not Dharma as view. It's not easy. Now we need views too, because that's how the ordinary people think. And we have to understand how they think, respond to them with compassion and wisdom, so that we help them to open up their minds. And one of the first things that we must do is to tell them this is only one idea. Do not get caught up with it. And it's one of those things that terrifies me, to meet Buddhists or people with religion who say, I found the truth, and this is the one, nothing else is true. And you find you can't talk about any other thing. And religious people can be some of the most stubborn, stupidest people in that sense, because they just got stuck with one view and they say that is true. Right? They don't realize religion is such a collection of words. You can say the words in any way you like, you can prove yourself correct. Right? Remember this funny story about the difference between a philosopher and a theologian? A theologian can be a Buddhist speaker also. Anyway, in fact nowadays I think the word theologian applies to a Buddhist speaker just as qualifiedly as any other speaker. A quick by someone. It says that a philosopher is someone who is looking for a black cat that in a totally dark room. Okay? He's looking for the black cat in a totally dark room.
And the cat doesn't exist.
And the cat doesn't exist, okay? But he's just looking for this cat.
Doesn't exist.
The cat doesn't exist. Alright? And because when you say the cat doesn't exist, it's more funny, right? But the theologian is one who finds this cat, which is in a dark room and doesn't exist. He tells you, I found it. I found this cat. You know what I mean? I mean, if you look at all these theologians talk about God and so on, say, have you seen God? In the Tevijja Sutta, the Buddha asked the Brahmin, have you seen your God? Is it Mahabrahma? He said, no. What about your teachers and teachers before you, 7 generations? None of them have seen God. So then how can you talk about him? You have not met him at all. All right? So there you are.
So if a Western person switch on the light and says that there's no cat in the room.
Yeah. The Buddha turns on the light and says, no cat, no self. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so so what the Buddha is saying is we create these ideas. So we have to be very careful, especially as Buddhist speakers, what are we talking about? You know? So we should not turn the Buddha into a god. You know? We talk about Buddha in the Lotus Sutra, for example, as infinite. He doesn't die. And he was not even born. He only pretended to be born. He pretended to go through all those sufferings. He pretended to teach 45 years. He never said a word. So in other words, this Buddha is eternal. Once you say eternal, you have a problem there. You have fallen into the extreme of eternalism. You see? And then they also say Buddha exists forever, you know? Eternalism. Wow, it's a big problem to answer, you know. Now if you don't know early Buddhism, no problem. But if you know early Buddhism, you say, how can this be? So they've got an event story to debunk early Buddhism. Oh boy, and it goes on like that. You know? So, and then you have all these predictions about the Arahats becoming Buddhas. If the Buddha predicts, that means there is predestination. Predestination. That means these monks don't have to do anything. They are going to become Buddhas anyway. Then you have moral problem. So you and I don't have to do anything. You know, we just believe and we become Buddhas one day anyway.
Regardless of what they do.
So this becomes, I think if this predestination is like annihilationism, you know. I mean, that's the end of it. You don't have to do anything anymore. So these are some issues we have to seriously think about. We cannot just say, oh wow, look at all this sutra, you know, king of sutras and all these interesting words, but we don't think for ourselves. And we quote the Kalama Sutta, but we don't put it into practice. It's a time to put into practice. Think carefully for yourself. You know? So in a sense, you know, there was a time, I remember 30 years ago, when I give Dhamma talks, people were kind of listening with bright eyes, and even open mouth, some of them. You know, really keen to know the Dharma, you know, because the Dharma is so difficult to get those days. Today we are spoiled for teachers and sutras. and we come to a point where we even make fun of the Buddha and the Dharma and so on. So there you are, it's time we look at this parable of the blind man and the elephant.